started, but
Yeah.
I'll edit off all of our babbling at the beginning here. So.
We do have a 15-minute break so we can catch up in the worst of the cases.
Right. So I think what we're going to end up doing is we'll record the first two parts together, and then I'll edit it into two different parts. So just kind of give me a good
So
segue.
we have kind of 3 hours, so first hour, and the second hour, and third hour are all a little
Right.
different topics.
Right.
The agenda
Yeah, we'll
is
take a break between each.
Is at the very back, the door, the outside door.
Okay.
So if you
Yeah.
like to have that information.
Chris actually emailed it to me, so I have all the information for all three of those,
Okay.
and I'll relabel them. So actually, that's your mouse. That's going to do me no good whatsoever. Let's really? Oh, yeah, I can't shut down. Okay. Let me shut this one down so it's not glaring at you.
Okay. Cool.
Alrighty. Well, we're recording, so anytime you want to get started, we're good to go. If you want to wait another, I guess we're.
Introduce you then.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and I would like to introduce you to Rick Johnson, program manager of the AEC Education for Autodesk. He will be conducting this workshop this afternoon. We do have 3 hours, very interesting topics, and I would appreciate if you please sign in at the entrance of the door. You have a sign-in sheet. If you haven't signed it, please do so. So, enjoy.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Well, it's nice to be here in Indiana with you guys today. I actually lived in Indiana when I was a little kid in Lafayette, near Purdue. And my grandfather is a Purdue graduate. I don't know if there's any, you guys hate Purdue or not here. I don't know how the rivalries work. But that's my connection to Indiana. So everyone's an architecture student? And what year are you all? All different years or all the same year? So some graduate, some fourth. Anybody prior to fourth? Third year. Okay. So third through graduate. Cool. And everyone's has used Revit previously? Some basics. Okay, we're going to cover some more advanced topics today. So if you want me to slow down, let me know. We can reverse gears a little bit. And I want to double check everyone had a chance to get the links. Make sure you've got Revit 2015, Dynamo, Fusion 360. Yes.
What all those programs work on 2014?
Dynamo might work on 2014. I don't know if it will or not. It will not work on 2013. You can try it. So that's what we'll be using today. If you haven't downloaded Fusion, it'll be too late. It may not be too late. You can do it on one of the breaks. You might be able to do it. And same with Dynamo. So we're going to do second hour, we'll look at Dynamo, and third hour, we'll look at Fusion. So if you haven't downloaded those, Dynamo's pretty quick download you can do. Fusion's probably about 20 minutes to get through the whole setup, which is pretty good. Revit, you're looking at like hours. If you're doing it here at school on a Wi-Fi. At home you can do it faster, but yeah, you won't be able to do Revit quickly. All right, so that's it for setup. The other thing is I cannot see your screens, and it'll be challenging for me to get up to you, I think. So please raise your hand if you have a question or get stuck somewhere. You know, don't feel bad at all. It's better than getting lost. It's not an assignment, at least not from my perspective, so it's all about learning. So, no pressure, it's all about learning. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at some advanced family editing to start off with. So everybody's able to open up Revit 2015, hopefully, or 2014 if not. I want to look at some basic family editing. This first part you can be in either version of Revit, you'll be fine. So we're going to start off here. And I'm going to adjust my screen. I can see the left side isn't showing up, so let me just adjust this here. There we go. Purple R, that's on the screen. Over to here. So we'll do a new project right here. All right, so we'll start a new project just to get started. And then we'll look at making families. So who here has made their own family before in Revit? So everyone's had that experience. Who here has added parameters to their own family in Revit? So we're getting there. Okay, cool. And who here has made an adaptive family? A little bit. All right. Those are the topics we're going to cover today. So if we're going too slow, same thing. We can speed it up. We're going to look at making some families. So the first thing we're going to do is just learn a couple of tricks that I've learned to help make families work well. So we're going to start off and make just a wall right in the middle of our project, just a basic wall. Start off. And I'm going to go to the, after making that wall, I'll go to the 3D view and look at it. I like to turn on the shaded view down at the bottom left when I'm in 3D just to see a little more clearly what I'm looking at. So basic wall. A lot of the trouble of making families students have is getting off the ground, literally, because everything in default, everything in Revit, the default is on the ground on one of the levels, so the horizontal planes. So it's important to get up and off of the ground in architecture. So we're going to put some families on a wall. So we're going to go to the R, and we're going to hover over New, and pick Family. So R, New Family. And we're going to do a generic family. I like generic families. They're a good place to start. You can do a lot with them. If you master the generic families, then you can pretty much do most of the others, except for the mechanical and electrical families. Those take a little bit, a little extra. So it's a good place to start. We're going to do just a regular old generic model. So right here, generic model, and say open. So here I am. I'm looking down at the ground. You can see I'm at the reference level. So basically at the ground plane, I'm making a family, and I'm staring at the ground. And all my tools to make families are up across the top. I've got extrusions and sweeps and revolves. Let's go ahead and make an extrusion, which is probably the easiest shape to make. And you've got all the tools here, splines and lines and whatever type of shape you'd like. We'll just do lines for now, that's fine. So draw a basic shape. Maybe a box with the corner bitten off of it. Trick is to make sure everything closes up nicely. When you're done, hit finish. So there's my little shape I've made. Assume this is a wall panel I want to place in Revit. Then I can come back, once I've created that shape, two things. Before I load this back into the project, I always want to save. So I go blue R, and I hit save. Otherwise it's called Family 1. And I've looked at students' models, and I have Family 1, Family 2, Family 3, Family 4, Family 5. I'm like, no wonder you stay up all night in studio. You can't tell what anything is. So be nice to your tired self and name everything so that later on you know what everything is. Just give that a name. We'll call it wall panel. So there it is. I've given it a name. Now if I were to load this into the project, you can see it's on the reference level. So where's it going to put it in the Revit project? On the floor. But that's not where I want it necessarily. I want it up on the wall. So if you go over here, to the top left, there's a little button with a yellow folder next to it. So if you click on that, there's a couple little check boxes. It's always the little check boxes that get you. you weren't sure why it's not doing what you don't want it to do, there's a little mischievous checkbox somewhere that's messing you up. So the ones I want to check are two. The first one is work plane based. That means the default is at their reference level, their level or floor plan based. I want to make it work plane based. That means I can place it on any work plane. It doesn't have to be a floor. So that's pretty helpful to go vertical. And this one's a little bit counterintuitive, but the always vertical, it's kind of like, if you guys ever use navigation on your phone, you can either have north is always up, or you can let the thing get squirrely, so whichever way you're driving the car is always up. You guys ever play that with that on your navigation? It's kind of like that in Revit. Always vertical means the ground is always the ground, and up is always up, and left is always left, and right is always right. So if you want to change that, you actually uncheck always vertical. So the opposite of the defaults. So we'll say OK. And there are other helpful checkboxes in here that you can play with, but those are the two that are important that we'll look at. We'll say OK. The other one sometimes is cut with voids. If you want the family to be cut, like when there's a door there, that's an important one too. But for now, just check work plane based and uncheck always vertical. And now we can load this into our project. And by default, it's going to take us to a level 1 floor plan view. Go back to your 3D view. And now you'll notice, assuming that place on face is checked, you can now place this family on the wall anywhere you want to, or any other object you want to. Basically, you're placing it on the face of another object. So those little check boxes are little bugaboos. It's hard to know they're there, but once you know they're there, you can make the check boxes. You can put this on anything. So I could place this on a wall, on a door, anywhere I want it on a vertical surface. Is everybody able to do this? Anybody not able to do that?
What's the difference? I've seen there's like a generic base family. Is
Mhm.
that essentially the same thing?
It's similar. We'll look at those in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. I've basically taken a generic family and made it a face-based family by doing those check boxes. So it's good to know they're there. And just as a trial, you can watch, or you can do this yourself if you'd like, is you can make a wall. And if I do a curved wall, I can then place a component. It will also place that on a curved face as well. This is kind of dark with that projector, so let me... Let's put some white outlines to make it a little bit easier to see. So it'll find a tangential face to locate that. So you can put it on flat objects, on curved objects. It can be really helpful for placing families.
So it
Yes.
won't curve with the object.
It won't curve with the object, but it'll be tangent to the wall. Yeah. Which a lot of these basic functions in Revit are designed that way on purpose. If you're doing a curved wall in reality, there's certain materials that can curve, like concrete, plaster. If you're doing almost anything else to build a curved wall, it's going to be built of a series of flat panels. So that's why Revit does that, a series of flat panels, because it's kind of an architecture move to be built of a series of flat panels. All right, so if we go back into this family, just two more quick things on this generic family. You can say edit family, or you can double click on it. Takes you back. A couple of quick ways to add parameters. I'll show you my favorite ways. Let's go look at back in the family. we can look at the front view of this. It's good to add parameters, and the most common parameter we add is to change its dimensions, change its size. It may not want to be the same size all the time. So here in the family, I can come back and I can add a dimension. So DI for dimension. Or it's right here in the modify, add a dimension. So from the reference plane to the top of your family, your object, you can put a dimension here. Then I can select that dimension. And right here where it says label, I can add a parameter. So label, add parameter. And I can then give that dimension a parameter, which is really important. So I can call this simply the height, H-E-I-G-H-T. And can anybody describe what the difference is between type and instance parameters?
Type parameters will change the entire family. Parameter instance will change the individual one.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. So I like to give the example of a door. Doors in a project, you might have 3 or 4 different door widths, a 3-foot O door, a 2'8" door, a 4-foot door, and so on. But in the building, there'll be 30 3-foot doors, there'll be 4 4-foot doors, and 20 2'8" doors. That would be a type parameter. You want a bunch of the same type. But if you want, heaven forbid, all the doors to be different, you want a 3'1" door, a 3'1 1/2" wide door, a 4' 1" door, you're going to raise the cost on your project like crazy. Maybe there's a compelling reason to do that. That would be an instance parameter. If they all want to be unique, that would be an instance parameter. So let's do an instance parameter for this one. So height, instance, and say OK. And now it's always important to test your parameters before you load it to the project to make sure it works. And I do that in the upper left under family types. There are 4 little blue squares. I click on that. And then from here, you can see that my dimension, my height dimension, is shown up as a parameter. And I can change that. I move this window. Sometimes it wants to be right on top of the object. I move it off to the side. And I can change that height and say apply. And I can watch the thing grow or shrink depending on the dimensions I put in here. If there's a failure, which happens a lot, you're just in testing mode, it will say sketch is over constrained or can't resolve constraints. And to debug that, the trick I find is to dimension something else. So what about this could I dimension? Maybe I could put a reference plane at the top. So let me just demonstrate that. I could do a reference plane or a reference line. Let's do reference plane. And I could, instead of dimensioning the box, I could dimension the line. So let me delete this here. I'll do a dimension now to the reference plane. And I'll give that the height parameter. And I can test this to make sure that's working. So I'll change that, make it taller, 4, and say apply. Now I can say I'm controlling the reference plane successfully, and that's working. Now all I have to do is align, so AL for align, or it's up here, the align tool. I click the reference plane as a target, then I click the top of my box. It's going to shoot it up to there. There's a little lock that appears. I can lock that, and now they're stuck together like glue. So if I come in here, I can change my height, apply, and watch it grow and shrink. So that's the trick to debugging those. They come in, they don't work. Try to dimension something else. Try to get it to work at the lowest form with these reference lines. So if I create something called reference lines, see if you can get these green reference lines to move where you want them to first, and then align your shape to those green reference lines. So there's a couple of tricks. I know that those come in, they don't always do what you want them to do. That's a way of debugging. So another parameter that's really critical in architecture is material. We always assign material to our building designs. So if I click on the object, you can see over here under materials and finishes, I have a material. Right now it says by category. There's a little button. It tells you you have no idea what that is. But that's a parameter button. So if I click on that, I can add a parameter. So I'll add a parameter. I can call this one material. I'll make it an instance parameter as well. And I'll say OK here and say OK here. And now I'm good to go. I've got two parameters, height and material. If I load this back into my project, I can say overwrite the existing version. You can see they all change. Now I can click on these individually. And now you can see I can adjust the material and the height of these individually. So I can change the materials, I can change the height of all of these individually. That's a basic example, but knowing how to do that is super powerful. You can put in objects, you can change them, alter them, and a lot of things we do in architecture have multiples, so you can affect that across the whole project. All right, so let's do one more generic family, maybe one or two more, and then we'll move on to another topic. So if you guys go to the purple R, and you get new family again, in generic model, you guys mentioned the face-based, so that's a family that's going to stick on faces automatically, so you guys know what that does now. We're going to do a line-based. So generic model line-based. And a little bit later we'll look at generic model pattern-based, which can be pretty cool. Just know that's one of the generic models. So generic model line-based. So we'll say open on this. So this is pretty cool. You can see there's a little line here. And there's a start working plane and an end working plane, and there's already a length parameter built in. So whatever I draw this line in Revit, I will drag across whatever shape I have from point A to point B. So let's come to my left view over here, left view. And I can come again, do the simplest one, which is called an extrusion. Then I can draw some sort of shape. And finish that shape off. And go back to my reference level. You can see my shape. It's right here. And if I click on it, there are little blue triangles. You can drag it so it's right in the middle. Right now there's no association between this shape and the line-based family. So I have to use the alignment tool, which is up here, align. I'll pick the back, the starting point reference plane, and then click the back of my object. A little blue lock appears, I lock that. Then I do the same thing for the front. I click the front reference plane, the front of that object, and I click the lock, and that locks it to the front. And now I can test it. If I come back and change my family types, and I change the length to whatever I want to, say apply, I will watch that shape grow with that line. So go ahead and say okay if that's working. Anybody need help getting that to work? You guys got it? Okay, then we always save it. So blue R, save, give it a name. Calling mine line-based family. Then I hit save. Now I load this into my project. And you can see I can load it into another family or to the project. Which one do I want to load it to? The project, most of the time. You can also do nested families, which is families inside of families. So you can get pretty complex with your family editing. So if I have a door family, and I want the handle to be a separate family and have its own function, I can take a door handle and load it to the door family, and then load it to the project. So families can have multiple families inside of a family. That's not confusing. All right. Yes?
If you were to, in that instance, if we were to look at the handle to the door, would you save that sort of, the parameters of that family on the door, and then just load the door, and then the handle would be?
That's where it gets tricky. You have parameters for the handle, then you load it into the door, and you have to link the parameters.
So it kind of packages them?
Yeah, so when you finally load to the project, you can control the door parameters and the handle parameters in the project. Those get a little bit confusing, but you'll find when you're working as a professional, you just have to do those nested families sometimes. Especially, doors and, certain wall components and things, you'll find yourself using those. But for now, we'll load this into our project. So it's a line-based. So you can see placed on face is checked. So if I go to my 3D view and hover over one of these walls, I can now draw a line on the wall to place that family. And every time I draw a line, I'm placing that family on a wall. It works best for straight things. It's not going to let you do this kind on a curve. If you want to draw on the ground, you click on Place on Work Plane instead, and now you can draw this thing on the ground. So that's a line-based family. So anything that wants to be linear, you can just extrude that shape as long as you want it in a line-based family. And those can be pretty helpful as well. And the cool part with all these families, if you want to make a design change, you go back, edit the family, and every instance of the family, the entire product gets updated. So that's the power of that. And if you look back in history, where this technology's come, if you look back to the Renaissance, that's when drawings were invented. So plans, sections, orthographic projections. Think Renaissance. That's when that stuff came about. It's hard to believe that's a technology because we take it for granted. Everything has drawings. We built a building, there's drawings. And it came about in the Renaissance. So you move forward to 1983, we have AutoCAD for the PC. So now people could still draw that Renaissance technology, but using a digital pen. And the huge benefit there was not having to erase. You could copy and paste. Instead of drawing something over, you could just copy something and paste it. And now with building information modeling, you can make a change to one element and we'll update an entire project in 3 dimensions and all of your drawings, which is really powerful. So that's why this has been adopted so heavily, because of that power. All right, so that's generic modeling. Now let's look over to and a couple of tricks, for doing that, making parameters. Let's go ahead and do a new family again. So the blue R, new family. And let's do generic model adaptive. So new family, generic model adaptive, and we'll say open here. Let me see if changing the brightness on my laptop helps. Let me just try that. Nope. Don't see brightness on here. If you guys can't see, let me know, and I'll see if I can do something to increase the contrast a little bit in Revit. You can see adaptive families are on this gray background. So they're a little bit different. All the others on a white background in Revit, this is gray. So now I'm in crazy land. Helps you know that I'm in a different environment. So here it is. You can see the basic environment has 2 vertical work planes. So this one and this one. And it has a horizontal work plane, the ground plane, represented by the black dash that's the center line. So ground plane, vertical plane, and you can make more planes. So this works a little bit differently. If I come over, remember your traditional families have a bunch of modeling tools up on the upper left. And this one has no modeling tools. So it's very different. I need to come back and start by drawing lines. So you guys can pick a spline first. Spline. And you can see by default it's going to start drawing on the ground plane, which is what we want. So make a spline with about 4 or 5 points. When you're done, hit escape. So now I've got a spline on the ground. It's good to press shift and hold your mouse wheel down to make sure it really is on the ground. That's pretty important. It can be a little confusing as where you are sometimes. So you hit escape a couple times so you get your white selection arrow, and then click that line you've drawn. And so in adaptive families, it's a little bit different to create forms. Here you come up here to the top right, and you say create form. You can do solid form or void. Voids are negative, solids positive. And if you click that button, Revit attempts to make a shape from whatever you've drawn. So we do that spline, and then there is the shape. I'll turn on my shaded view to see it a little bit better. So there's my shape. Now from here I can edit this. I can click on either the points or the lines. And every time I click on something I get a little, they're called a UCS in CAD, but really it's a direction XYZ axis. And I can drag this around and start to modify my shape. If I click the arrows, I move in one axis. If I click the little boxes, I move constrained to 2 axes at the same time. So I can move the lines. I can also hover over the edges and find the points. If I have a hard time finding those, I can hover where they are and hit tab. Eventually we'll find the little point, little blue points, and I can modify and move just 1 point at a time. And I can start to create really complex shapes this way. Is everyone able to do that? Anybody need help getting there?
Is there a way to show your points on the model?
There is, and I think the shortcut is to double click it, and that can be a little challenging. Or if you can highlight the model, there's something called X-ray mode. So if you click that, you can actually see all the points on the model. So X-ray versus regular mode, that's a good point. These can be a little bit tough to select. If you have a hard time selecting it, just hover on one of the edges and hit tab on your keyboard till the whole thing selects, and then you can get to that X-ray mode. And in X-ray mode, you can see there's more you can do. You can add edges, you can add profiles, dissolve. There are more functions you can do. And we'll play with a couple other things you can do. So really good question. Yeah, X-ray mode. All right, anybody else? Let's go to the next thing. Cool. So that's taking, again, Revit, the default's always on the ground, so I drew on the ground and go up. So let's take this thing off of the ground. So select your object, hit delete. That's going to take your object out. So now I can see my vertical work plane. And work planes in Revit are really powerful, but they're not intuitive because you don't see them, they don't select automatically. You have to select them and you have to understand them. So if you want to increase your Revit skills, one of the best things you can do is watch YouTube videos on work plane editing and controlling those work planes because they really affect what you do. So I'm going to click on one of these work planes. And if I click the little show button up under modify, it's also under create, it's called show work plane. That will show the active work plane. And I can select it like I did. If it doesn't select for you, you can click set work plane and click it. That'll make it the active work plane. So you can see you can choose either of the vertical planes. And if show is turned on, you'll see it. I can set it, make it the ground plane again. But right now I want the vertical plane right in the middle. So now I can draw a shape on the vertical plane. So you follow the same process. We'll do a spline of maybe 4 or 5 points. Hit escape a couple times to finish that up. And there it is. You can click on that spline. And you can click on the create form. I can create a solid out of that. I can grab the edge. I can pull it out to make it a little bit bigger. And there's my shape. And I can come back, find the points, and I can edit that as much as I'd like. So once you've got a form, does anybody need help getting that? We're going to start to alter this form a little bit. Is it good? From here you can add what's called a pattern. And to do that, you need to select your surface. So I hover over the edge and I hit tab to select the whole thing. I know I've got it when it turns blue. And then up at the top there's a button called Divide Surface. So I click on that Divide Surface. And you can see right away it turns it into a bit of a lattice. So it's a lattice shape. And over here I have on the left the default is no pattern. But if I click the word no pattern, I can pull this down and find all sorts of patterns. The ones that are black and white are part solid, part void. So go ahead and pick a pattern. I'm just going to pick a part solid, part void triangle. And that's going to apply a pattern to that surface. And as you notice, there are all sorts of patterns you can pick from to help you with your design. But the cool part is you can edit your pattern from there. So over on the left, you can choose the number. So I can increase the number. It's 24 across. That's going to densify the pattern. Change the number, hit apply. I can make it less and make it smaller. I can change the justification. I can do fixed number. I can do a maximum spacing. You can rotate the whole darn thing, so you can change the rotation angle. So I'll put mine on a 45. Say apply. I can start to really adjust this pattern to what my design is. I can offset the pattern from the surface if I want to. That's an option as well. And quite a few options in here. The one thing to look at is you've got a U grid and a V grid. And that is up here, U and V. If you guys think back to geometry class in high school, you guys plotted things out in the Cartesian coordinate system. So X, Y, and Z. And you have that double-lined paper with little squares. You guys remember doing that? Bring back nightmares or happy memories? High school and plotting those things out in geometry class? That's X, Y, Z. And most things in Revit are X, Y, Z. When you start to make a really complex form like this, heaven help you to find the X, Y, Z location of these things. So they call it U and V. And you can see the V is easier to remember. That's the vertical lines. And U is the horizontal lines. So they scrap the X, Y, Z and go with U and V. And if you get into really sophisticated rendering, like using 3D Studio Max, you'll see U and V there again. Because 3D Studio Max, you can render people's faces, characters, or complex architectural forms. When you unwrap something to put on textures, it's UV mapping. It's UV, and they go one step further, 3ds Max, it's UVW. And W is kind of the third dimension. So U and V mapping. The other thing that I find interesting to change, so U and V. At the very top, the border tile constraints, you can see mine is set to partial. That means it's going to cut my pattern at the edge of my shape. But I can change this to empty. That means it will only build the pattern where it can be whole shapes. So that can be very helpful, in your architecture. If it's just whole building panels you're dealing with, and you want it to only be the whole building panels, you can do that. Or conversely, you can do overhanging. So you kind of define the boundaries, but at the ends of those boundaries, the panels might want to overhang. So again, you can think of the architectural applications of that. Cutting it off to make a building that cuts off at the edge of the pattern, or the pattern is more important than the building profile, and so the top and side of the building, the pattern can overhang, or conversely, the pattern can sit within. So lots of patterns here. There's so many options, so many parameters. You can really model about any pattern you can imagine. a combination of picking a base pattern and then editing it from there to create that.
Can you add a thickness to this pattern besides doing it in a custom pattern-based pattern?
That's where you do it. The only thing you can really do right here is you can do an offset. So you can raise it off the grid a certain amount.
But it still has that thickness of 0.
Of 0, yes.
Okay.
So I know we talked about that. We mentioned that just a little bit. You'd come in and do File, New Family, and you would do a generic model, pattern-based.
And then that's where you do it.
And this is where you do it. And you can see these pattern-based families have 4 points. And so when you put the two things together, that's where you can then load this into the other family and create some thickness, create some panels. Again, which is a nested family, a family inside of a family. All right, so here's where we create. Let's go ahead and delete this. And if you have any previous shapes, delete those. So we're back to basics. Now we want to set our work plane to the ground again. So I click on the Set button, Set, click the ground plane. Or you can double click the ground plane, it's going to set it also. So now I know I'm drawing on the ground. Now it's a little hard to see, but there is a vertical plane right here and one going the other way. Comes with these default too, but I want more planes so I can draw more shapes. So I'm going to come back and I'll just say plane. So either from modify or create, it's in the same place. Little button called plane, it's going to make a reference plane. And I want to draw a second reference plane parallel to but in front of the existing plane. So out here I'll draw a second plane. Oops. And I need to make sure that my active plane, I've messed around with it, my active plane needs to be the ground plane. And draw a second plane parallel to and in front of the first plane. And you'll notice it gives you little degrees. If it's 90 degrees, then I know it's parallel to the other plane. So I've got 2 planes. And now you can see I can set those as my current plane. So here's the one in front, and here's the one in back. So you got 2 reference planes. When you have trouble making those? The trick is making your active plane the ground plane so you can draw more than one. All right, so you want to highlight as you set your active plane to this back plane. Leave the front one alone for now. And on this, I'll use my spline tool again. And I'll create a spline with just 3 points, and then hit escape. And then make one right below that with 3 points. So 2 rainbows, if you will. Or 2 frowny faces, if you'd rather. And then use our regular line tool to connect it. So it's a solid, not a solid, but a continuous closed shape. So use a regular line tool to do that. It's important here to zoom in and make sure it snaps. You get little pink or purple endpoint snaps to let you know you're clicking on the little points. Make sure you've got that, or this won't work. Hit escape, and I'll draw another line here. From this point over to this point. Hit escape, and that's going to close that shape. So there's my frowny face. Now I want to draw the opposite on the other work plane. So I'm going to go back and say, set work plane, and I'll pick the work plane in front. And now I'll draw the smiley face again with 3 points. It's not critical but important to have the same number of points. This will work a little bit better. And click my spline here. Spline, 3 points. Now I'm happy. It's a happy face. Three points here. Now I click the line tool to connect each end. So from here to here, I'll hit escape. And from here to here, cool. Now you've got the frowny and the smiley. You can zoom around to make sure you've got them separate planes and looking good. Once you've got that, you can click on escape or click your modify button and select all of the lines. You can do that by clicking a line, holding control, and grabbing all 8 lines. Or you can attempt to do a crossing window, but make sure you grab all of them. Once you've got that, you can say create form. Oops. Mine didn't do it, which means I wasn't careful. Make sure I have everything. Oh. If it doesn't create form, you want to make sure you snap. I'm not being super careful here. I'll try again and be a little more careful. This is my first one. Whose is working? Am I the only one? So I've messed up here. You can use Revit a long time and it can still give you grief. Now late at night when it's giving you grief, you've met somebody from Autodesk, you can say, darn that Reed Johnson, ruining my life. Alright, let's see if that does it. There we go. As I get older, my eyes get worse, and it's harder and harder to see those little snaps to make sure I actually close everything up. So now I've got this surface, and you can see if I click on one of the faces, I might have to hover over the edge and hit tab to get just the face. You can see I can push and pull on that face, and it will make the whole thing stretch. Don't get any crazier than that, or the next step won't work. So we're going to go ahead and dimension this thing and add parameters. So just like a generic family can have parameters, a basic family, one of these adaptive families can have parameters as well. So I'm going to set my work plane down to the ground again. So that's important. I want my dimensions to be on the ground, but they're dimensioning, referencing the shape I've made up above. And I'll add a dimension, and I'll click one face. You can see it highlights the entire face in blue. Then I need to orbit around. I hold shift on my keyboard, press the scroll wheel down to orbit over, and I'll grab the left face, and then I click off to the side to finish that up. And that's going to create a little dimension. So if I click on that dimension, just like I did in the generic family editor, I can come to the top under label and say add parameter and give it a name. We'll call this one width, and we'll make it an instance parameter again as well. So instance parameter, and we'll say OK. And now you can test it and troubleshoot and see if it's going to work. So I go back to my family types, the little, looks like 4 little blue squares in the upper left. And you'll see that your width has shown up now. And you can type this in and change the width within reason and say apply. and watch the thing grow or shrink. Does that not work for anybody? Needs help? You guys got it? Cool. You guys are really good. All right, so I've got this family. I've saved it. I haven't saved it. It's called Family 3. So give it a name. So I'll say File, Save As, Family, and I'll call it, Crazy Roof or whatever this wants to be. So saving it gives it a name. Then I can load it into my project here. To my basic project 1. Now I can click to place this thing in a floor plan, but I'll need to go to my 3D view to see it. So there it is. And now in Revit I've got this family. I can select it and I can change its parameters. You can see here I can now that I'm in the project, I can actually adjust the length of this roof and have it fit my project. I can move it around and put it where it needs to go. All right, and with that we've reached 4 o'clock, so the first hour. And that's hopefully some tips and tricks to help you with family editing, making parameters, and building families. So when we come back, we're going to use these families to build on this and do the next step, which is Dynamo. So you want to save your project, so blue R, save. And save your project somewhere. If you want to use this again, save it somewhere you can find it again. We'll hit save there. Cool. And we'll just take a quick little break, and we'll come back. Is 5 minutes enough? Run to the bathroom and come back? All right, cool. If you don't have Dynamo already, it's a chance to quickly go to, you'll have to close Revit, but you go to, and I don't have internet on right now, but you go to dynamobim.org, and it's a big button that says install. You want to close Revit first before you do that. It's a pretty quick install. You can do it 10 minutes on that one if you don't have it already. Which way is the, this way?